Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra.
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people
Associated with the creation
or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked,
and sometimes what didn't,
you will also hear very personal experiences.
and insights that would trigger your thoughts
and inspire you to do even greater things.
Sanjay Tambwekar, our guest this week on the Software People Stories, got his first taste of engineering at shipyards watching his father build barges. Thereafter, he graduated from IIT Bombay and later with a master's in computer science from the US, after which he was exposed to systems engineering through a brief stint at Bell Labs. Back in India, he was part of the supercomputer team at CDAC, later digital payments at Verifone, where he stepped into management, and then worked in telecom networks and solutions at Sasken, data storage at NetApp, where he had global teams responsibility, and now at Qwikcilver, where he is the CTO. He talks about his transitions to management and his current role as a CTO in his current organization. A project close to Sanjay and his wife centers around road safety, on which he shares a strong message. And as always, this episode closes with a message for those aspiring to have a career in IT and software. Listen on. So hi, Sanjay. A very warm welcome to you on the Software People Stories podcast. I've been looking forward to our conversation and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Chitra. Looking forward to the conversation. It's been a while since we chatted, but yeah, this has been really interesting to know what you're doing, and I'm happy that I can actually share my story here.
Great, thank you. So we begin usually by asking our guests to introduce themselves. And so how would you like to do that for our listeners?
I am Sanjay Tambwekar, and as the CTO, I lead the evolution of the prepaid solutions at Qwikcilver. Now we are merging into Pine Labs, so we'll soon be Pine Labs. And prior to this, my journey covers different domains, parallel computing, payments, telecom, digital storage. So that's on the professional side. And on the personal side, in the memory of our daughter, my wife and I run the Arundhati Foundation with a primary focus to improve road safety.
That's nice, Sanjay. Thanks so much. I'd like to start by, in terms of asking you, where did your interest in software or technology come from? And where did your segue into this domain begin? How far do you go back?
I go back a long way. But technology-wise, it's probably been, right from the very early days. My dad was a marine engineer, and he started the Tempo Engineering Works in Goa. And I used to go to those workshops of his where they built barges. And, I was quite fascinated by all the machinery and how they put things together, etc. So engineering as a discipline and, what it means was something that I liked very early on in my days. Plus, of course, the natural inclination maybe towards math and physics and so on. It was there. The engineering mindset was probably always there. But serendipity brought me into software. Okay, I'm sure that I would have been in a related field. Software per se was a little bit of a serendipity. When I did my BTech from IIT Mumbai, I graduated in electronics and communications. That was actually at that time called EE. And electronics, communications, signal processing were my favorite subjects then. And I was to go to my master's to the US. But those days when we got stuff by snail mail, my I-20 did not arrive in time. And as the university was not okay to defer the joining date, I chose to basically pick up a job in Mumbai. And I landed a job in TUL. While I was introduced to computers, even during my engineering days, my role in TUL was purely software, right? And then it actually got me interested in some of the various nuances of the software industry, algorithms and all the other stuff. And then I went on to do my master's. But this time I applied in computer science. And yes, it was indeed fortunate that I got into computer science, though I did not have any background at that time. And but that experience at TUL did help me. And after completing that, it was very clear that my path would be in implementing or designing software systems and software solutions. But a lot of my work was actually closer to the systems, right, for a long time. And then, of course, went into payments, which became a little bit of a higher level. But a lot of my work was at the systems level. So that was how I got started.
That's interesting, Sanjay. So from those early days in software development and building systems and solutions, what were some of your early lessons that you took away and perhaps helped you later on in your career?
At each stage, you do pick up some things which are key and valuable, and those experiences stay with you, right? A lot of the experiences are through the hard situations that you encounter, the difficulties that you encounter. And those are things that actually stay with you longer. My first stint was with Bell Northern Research. Actually, that was after I completed my master's, and it was a short stint. But I actually got to understand the difficulties in debugging a system that is remote. And what does it really mean to access a system that is sitting in North Carolina and a system that is running in Canada, and what does it mean to debug that system? And those were some of the elements that have actually stayed with me in terms of what does it really mean to build enterprise software. From there, I came to India, and I was part of the first team that CDAC put together to build our supercomputer. My focus was in the software team, and we were building software to support 4 nodes to 64 nodes. And it was, again, a very heady time for us because a lot of learning, a lot of new things to pick up and understand how things can be put together. But more importantly, actually taking it to the people who really need to use it. And so to help some of the users from the government labs mainly to adapt their software to our systems. And that was also interesting, right? Because we were trying to build some features into our products, which for them probably was an over engineering. They didn't really need those. Once we realized that, we actually dropped those. But in a few years, it became evident that Moore's law will catch up, and the power of a single CPU will soon be the power of a 4-node or 8-node parallel machine. And so it was actually a kind of a realization also in terms of how you have to really stay abreast of the technology and how you need to actually adapt. So we went on to actually then start using the power of a network computing as opposed to trying to build a dedicated parallel system. From then on, when I moved to Verifone, that was my introduction to the world of digital payments. We started building a product for the emerging markets. This was meant for India, meant for Southeast Asia, Latin America, the Middle East or Africa. So the idea was that these are not countries or areas where you have very robust usage of digital payments, and you don't have as much of a strong network. And so some solutions could be actually interesting in this context. And we built our solution, which was an acquirer system on SEO Unix. While we did succeed in all these markets and we had decent customers in these markets, the big breakthrough came when Bank of America got interested in the product. And it pushed the envelope and the evolution of the product on many fronts. And very quickly, right, we in the team realized what it means, again, to meet the demands of a customer that is actually looking at enterprise class scale, enterprise class fault tolerance or resiliency, and related monitoring and related solutions. So it was actually a very, very significant learning that happened in that process. And this is where I moved into management, right? It was, in my mind, fairly earlier in my career. I might have actually preferred to be technical for a longer time. But it was the outcome of a situation where we did not have as many senior people around in the domain or the technical skills. And I picked up the mantle. So those were some of the early learnings that I had. But some of those actually kind of got reinforced when I went to Sasken and I worked with Nortel in leading a team. So that team was, in its peak was about 500 people. But we worked on software for wireless communications, building the software that goes into base stations, right from layer 1 signal processing up to the controllers and so on, the base station controllers, which is a whole traffic management, the administration and so on. And again, a big lesson in enterprise class software in multiple angles, right? Not just about high availability, high reliability, but also the process that is actually required to build a product that is of that caliber, right? And to be able to meet the expectations of finite availability, and what does it really mean to gear up the systems, gear up the support and all that to be able to handle that. In that app, I would say some of these things remain with me because, again, building an enterprise class product did require some of these fundamental understanding of how the systems need to be handled. The more important thing over there for me was that over the 6 years that I was there, or 7 years, the org evolved and I was managing a global team split across India and US. So those lessons were very different in terms of managing a team in the US, addressing the demands on both sides, but being able to be fair on both sides and so on. Journey at Qwikcilver has been very, very different. And I'll talk about that in more detail because I think the last 6 years, my role as a CTO at Qwikcilver has been very, very interesting and has actually pushed me up to learn and deliver something which was much more than I had done in the past.
Certainly looking forward to that part as well, Sanjay. Have a whole lot of questions coming up. Two things caught my attention. One was when you said that, you moved from Verifone to Sasken. And even before that, an instance where one of your customers, Bank of America, actually drove in some sense or gave the impetus to a very, very different kind of innovation and building out, the necessary infrastructure to support that. And the contrast to that was when you mentioned that in CDAC, after you were helping develop the software that's associated with the supercomputer and actually taking it to government labs and convincing people there that, hey, this could be useful to your daily work. And there I see two contrasts, right? So my question around it is, when it comes to customer empathy and building relationships with customers, what is it that, in your experience you've seen that's helped you? Because these two are quite contrasting experiences. One where the customer is actually driving or leading in some sense, and that the product or the solution that you're creating has more of a likelihood of success because it's being driven largely by a customer's need or the customer's ability to see its value, versus you being part of something that could potentially help customers in many different ways, but customers really aren't ready for it.
Yeah, that's an interesting dichotomy. I wouldn't say necessarily that those government labs were wrong in any way, right? I mean, they had a problem to solve and they had the code to solve it, and it was basically how do I port this to the new system and how do I use it the best way, right? I mean, it was as simple as that to start with. But you're right. Very often we face this challenge. When we go to customers, there are some who grasp the potential. And that is also because they carry a vision with them, right? They do have a sense that they want to grow a business, or they see that they want to harness the power of the technology and to be able to do things not just more efficiently, but do it differently and to bring more value. And if they have a vision and you're able to actually marry the two, it has a lot more benefit that you have. The cases where you are actually discussing it in the context of a task to be completed, it becomes a very transactional kind of an engagement where you need to get that solved. I mean, it is still important to be solved, but it may not really evolve a whole lot beyond that. And in a lot of these cases, right, the approach of the customer or the way you engage with the customer will make a difference, because when you start engaging them as a partner and when you start actually discussing with them on possibilities, or when you listen a little more, then you can actually bring out the possibilities rather than be in a position where the customer tells you this is a task to be done and please do it. So if you actually understand why, if you understand what is the real problem behind that ask, then you can actually see more possibilities. Or the other thing, of course, is the ability to actually bring the best practices from 10 different customers or 100 different customers that you have. And how does that actually feed in? So the knowledge that you get from the other customers and the overall confidence that you get in terms of bringing a solution to the table also increases that much when you have that variety in your product mix. So some of these things actually evolve over a period of time. I can't say that you can get that upfront, but that empathy and the willingness to just listen a little bit and then position yourself, not necessarily trying to oversell, not necessarily trying to create a situation where you're overcommitting, but creating a path, right, that says that, okay, this is how we can evolve together.
So perhaps more co-creating and involving customers and actually developing a solution that more of a win-win for both the creator and the consumer.
Correct.
Interesting that you said your first exposure to digital payments was way back then in Verifone, and couldn't help but thinking what the scenario is with digital payments today. I mean, today, even a vegetable seller, and I had this experience last year just as the lockdown was coming on, I had been a little reluctant to put a payment app on my phone. And one morning when I was picking up vegetables right outside my house, this person says, Amma, you don't have a Google Pay. And, it was like a aha moment right then and there. You said that these things evolve, customer relationships and understanding and empathizing with them to build products evolves. And in the space of digital payments, I think, it couldn't be more reflective of an example that's suddenly now so all around us. What would you share with respect to that evolution?
There are various angles to digital payments. Okay, I may not be able to touch upon all the different aspects of it. And just to give you a flavor, right? There is the whole aspect of payments, which you could do still using a debit or a credit card, but digitally, right? You don't necessarily have to carry a physical card to do that. You have the ability to do what we do at Qwikcilver, that is actually prepaid cards. Your refunds and cashback could be purely digital. Your ability to transact buy something would be completely digital without ever having to physically use a cash or a card anywhere. Banking could be completely digital. There are so many different aspects. Forex could be actually digital, cross-border payments and those kind of things also. So there are various elements in this. And what we are doing at Qwikcilver is in the domain of digital prepaid gift cards. This solution extends to things like cashbacks, refunds, loyalty. So there are various elements. I mean, the underlying construct is versatile that you can actually do various other things with that, being able to actually store some value and being able to convert that value when you actually utilize that. So this has actually been, when you think about the evolution, right? The part of it has been just the enablement of technology, what is available now, and the ability to actually scale that in the way we are able to do it with various technologies, whether it's the cloud or whether it is the way we can scale APIs or the way we can actually do with microservices and such architectures. So various elements of technology. There's also the other element that comes into play in terms of how some of these things are becoming open, right? So that we can interface with other systems. I mean, in India, certainly NPCI is very, very solid payment infrastructure that we have, far better than what most other countries have. And this kind of an infrastructure actually allows us to do many, many things. And in that regard also, the RBI has been forward-looking. Okay, there has been definitely good thinking in terms of how things should evolve. They're not stopped at NPCI. They're now looking at the next generation of scale and what would it mean really, right, as we go to the next level. And certainly last year, like you rightly said, COVID situation completely flipped it, right? Cash was actually considered as an issue because the virus could spread via cash or by handling cards and so on. And so digital payments became more and more. I call it before Corona and after Corona effect, right? It is BC and AC. That change is sort of one directional in that sense, right? It is when people get vaccinated and when the travel restrictions and other restrictions go, people will want to actually, do things that they have not been able to do for one year. But from a payment point of view, I don't think they will go back on the digital payments. They will even continue to do more of digital payments.
Virat, a really interesting point is what I'm thinking, as you're speaking, also thinking that it's an interesting point in this conversation to kind of segue into the time when you moved from a more technical individual contributor role to management. What was that transition like for you is my first question. Follow-on question to that, when you said that in Sasken, you had a large team that was building wireless communication solutions. How was that transition for you? What were some of the things that you learned along that transition?
So when I was first entrusted with the management responsibility, right, it was a situation where we probably didn't have as many senior folks outside in the industry. And folks within Verifone entrusted me. I mean, they did definitely, it was a lot of, what shall I say? I mean, it was an endorsement or a vote of confidence that I felt when they gave me that responsibility. And it was sort of a first amongst equals because we were basically a group of peers And the person who was managing our team actually moved to the US because of this whole Bank of America deal that was coming through, and the reason to be very close to the customer and work through some of those details with the customer. And in that process, when I started basically taking on the larger role, I started in a mode where it's like a first amongst equals situation. But my learning was actually through the process of recognizing that, each one of my peers brought in a whole lot of strength. And so I always kept the ship in the leadership in mind, right? It has to be actually that we do it together. I'm not really a guy who feels that I know everything. And so I do rely on the people to help me with the process and help me understand what I do not. That has, I think, helped me a lot in terms of being able to understand what needs, what is the issue or what needs to be done. I do have to take responsibility for what I then decide to do, but I do take a lot of inputs in the process. The Sasken experience was a very different one, right? Because there were two differences. One, of course, was that in Verifone, I was very much a part of the team that built the product. And so I knew a lot of things inside out. So I was able to relate to many things directly. Right? In Sasken, that was not the case, right? This was a product that Nautil had built and we were actually taking it forward. And so there is, of course, one level of separation that happens. But more importantly was just the size of the team, right? The sheer size of the team meant that, you can't really be so detailed in each of those aspects. And so the organization building skills actually came to the fore, right? Because you do have to build a team that you can lean on. And for that, you need a lot of good people, right? You need to have the clarity about what is a good org structure. You need to have a clarity about how do you drive the lines of responsibility or accountability. You have to have the willingness to delegate or empower, right? So people can take their own decisions and be able to execute and not become bottlenecks. But you have to have a framework so that you know those exceptional conditions in which they have to reach out to you. So various of those things, and creating the vision to align people, right? It may not be completely as per plan. I mean, they may not really be things that you don't really worry about it in the context of saying that day to day or week to week, is it exactly as per plan or not? But overall, it is going in the right direction. And because this scale is so big, then you still want to have a connect with the people, then you create other mechanisms to connect because, and you don't want to really make it a connection that is bypassing the lines of authority, right? So you connect other mechanisms like coffee sessions. Okay, nowadays it's virtual coffee sessions, but ways in which you can actually connect or do some weekly roundups and communication. So everybody knows about key decisions, key customers, critical issues encountered, process improvements, innovations. All of those are important. And I've kept that going all through, right? That is an important part of actually keeping the team engaged, team aligned. And it actually is allowed me to have a connection with every single person in the team. It doesn't matter that I don't meet them on a daily basis or a weekly basis, right? But I'm connected because I have had those conversations in a smaller group with them. Those are some of the differences in the way that I adapted to that. But again, coming to Qwikcilver was again a very different story. Yeah, these have been actually probably some of the key elements of the differences in my roles and how I've grown in terms of a leadership role.
My next question is that when you have led and headed large organizations, how do you get a pulse or a sense of what's going on? One thing is, yes, through these connects, you do understand whether people are aligned, what their problems are. And how do you, again, two questions here, how do you get the inputs from people on the ground in terms of listening to their questions or concerns? And the next one being, as a leader, you somehow have to keep so much information in your mind, and some of it has to be discarded, some of it has to be updated. How do you do all that?
I don't know that I can give you any formula for that, Chitra. But the first part, right? Actually, when you engage in this virtual coffee sessions or coffee sessions, okay, the first thing is to basically just listen, right? Because you are trying to get to know what the individuals are doing at that particular time. Or in some cases, you already know because maybe there's been some release and somebody has contributed, and or there has been a particular innovation, or maybe it has got to do with a firefighting situation, whatever, right? You have some knowledge that, yes, there was some person who was involved in that. And so maybe in a team of 10 people in that coffee session, you know a little bit about 2 or 3 people already when you get in there. But there are maybe 7 people who you don't know the specifics. And you initially just listen, right, to say, what is it that is keeping you occupied right now? And, what is it that you have learned sort of, right, in these last, is there something new that you have actually picked up? And in the course of that discussion, then you start connecting the dots, right? Because you have a little bigger picture, you have a little more context, and you try to bring in that perspective as to when, so let's say somebody has actually brought in an innovation, right? And then you're trying to actually give them a context of how important this is, not just from a point of view of, let's say, efficiency or business, but maybe the other possibilities that it can lead to. And the kind of things that actually it triggers off in the rest of the folks also, because then you kind of try to actually pass on that value, or you try to trigger that kind of a value in some of the other people who may not be doing that. Similarly, you're just trying to connect the dots. I mean, a good example for me was that, and this is more recent, one of the teams was helping me with robotic process automation. And the solution they came up with was so neat that I actually forced a conversation with some of the other people in the group, because I felt that this actually can be taken further across. Right. So you get these nuggets, right? You may not get that if you did not actually have those conversations, or you may not understand them in as much detail if you did not have those conversations. And if you did not do that little bit of a diligence, you may not be able to exploit it as much for the benefit of the organization. So those are some of the things that you do. But you have to, of course, like you rightly said, there are so many things happening, and you try to connect the dots and you say, okay, this leverage is good. In other cases, it is good information, but maybe it is just filed away, and maybe 2 weeks later, it may be revived again. I don't know. There will be those kind of things.
Yeah, I certainly wish there was some kind of a framework or some sort of guidelines that could help you build up that kind of muscle, or, build a kind of exercise regimen around it that would enable you to, constantly to keep you connected or staying in touch. But yeah, I hope something like that comes up soon enough.
Well, there are, some of these things in my mind actually is about how you build your memory also, right? And I have a habit of taking down copious notes. Okay, so earlier I used to write, now I type mostly, because mostly it is online. And there are ways to link those ideas also right now, right? Even in a tool like Notes, you can do that, but there are better tools. I don't use the other tools so much. I use Note mostly, and I take copious notes, right? So that whole exercise of just taking notes reinforces some of the things in the memory, right? And they may be filed at a point where, at some point, that you can go back and refer it. And sometimes that just helps in connecting the dots when you actually see them.
Oh yeah, something, yes, absolutely, as simple as that, and it's kind of helped me as well. So coming on to what you are doing at Qwikcilver now in the role of a CTO, how is that role different from that of more of management from a people standpoint towards something like looking at technology and overall in the context of both business and customers?
It's been a very, very interesting journey. Okay, Qwikcilver, as I mentioned earlier, pioneered the concept of digital prepaid gift cards in India, and now the solution extends to various ways in which prepaid solutions can be used, right? Whether it is for cashbacks or refunds or loyalty, and it is spread across, what we call as closed loop, semi-closed loop, or open loop solutions. Closed loop means what you can use only within that particular brand, and open loop means like a Visa or a MasterCard, which you can use anywhere. The journey has been fantastic, but I just wanted to clarify one thing. Okay, I mean, I'm sure that out there, people probably have their idea about what a CTO role should be like. And I'll just tell you a little bit about what CTO means to an organization like Qwikcilver. Because when we were at NetApp, Chitra, clearly the CTO was not directly in line with the release management or release drivers and execution and so on, right? He may have influenced it, but was not directly involved. For a small organization like Qwikcilver, the startup ecosystem and so on, the CTO pretty much has the responsibility for both the strategy and the execution. So people management doesn't really go away. And it's actually a very important part of it because you want to build a culture. And that is also an important responsibility in the process. In my journey, various elements, right? I got a lot of satisfaction in terms of engaging with customers, evolving the product portfolio as we brought hundreds of merchants and corporates onto our platform. And not only that, right? We enabled the product capabilities and made it possible for us to foray into the international markets. So we now have customers in Southeast Asia, in Europe, in Middle East, in Australia. And in this sense, I would say that, very proudly, right? I feel we are an MNC out of India, right? Because in the past, whenever we've talked about MNCs, it's been the other way around, where it's really a company incorporated in the US or in Europe or whatever, and they have a center here. For us, it's been the other way around, where our product first made its presence felt in India. We have more than 90% market share in India. And from there, we have actually gone off into the other countries beyond our geography and being able to be very successful in terms of convincing our customers, being able to actually see that our product has capabilities that really are very, very good and meeting their expectations and being able to really make a difference over there. In this whole process, right, the thought process now changes in terms of various elements that you need to manage, because apart from execution, there's a whole aspect about how does that actually mean in terms of production systems, right, and the deployment, because we are managing it in a SaaS environment now, right? In the past, a lot of my experience was actually building enterprise class products, but which were deployed on-premise. And now we are talking about an enterprise class, which is a SaaS product, where now you have actually like hundreds of customers on a single platform. And what does it mean really to push the envelope for scale, for performance, for resiliency? Very, very different. More importantly, actually, what does it really mean when you're trying to build features? You have to think about these requirements that come from individual customers and then say, what does it mean at the product level? How do you really convert it to a core product feature? The SaaS always needs to have a core product approach. It's like almost a, fanatical or a zealous kind of an approach to say that we want only one code base, no matter. It has to be one single, even though we may be looking at requirements coming from different customers, it's really about saying, what is the product feature that will enable this? How do we really take it to 10 other customers after that and 20 others after that? So that's actually been one of the very, very important aspects of this. Even in this, right, some of the aspects of functional requirements are very, very easy to realize. I mean, it doesn't take that big a deal to say that you're able to build a required API or that you're able to build a required user interface and so on. But what does it really mean to deliver to the non-functional requirements, right? Some of them are stated, some of them are really completely implicit, right? What is scale? What does it mean when you have concurrency? What does it really mean when you want to make sure that you give a really good user experience even when your systems are not working well? And those are really very, very important aspects to consider in how the product evolves and how the product solutions get built. And to me, that has been one of the very important aspects of how we have evolved the product at Qwikcilver. When we started seeing big customers coming onto our systems, we had customers who would demand like 15, 20 transactions per second. Today, our systems are benchmarked beyond 1,000 transactions per second. So we are very, very comfortable in terms of how we can actually deal with some of the scale and how we are able to manage some of these things. Because you always have to stay at least 5x ahead of the customer demand, because you want to be able to actually do that. But at the same time, not add more to the infra, add more to your costs from operations, right? So those are the other challenges that you have to do. But one of the other elements, and I'm going back to what you talked about from a customer perspective, and I must say that in my role in the CTO shoes at Qwikcilver, actually give me a little better understanding or empathy to the different personas, okay? It is not always that you see so many different kinds of customers that you have to keep in mind when you build your solution. Over here, we are talking about end consumer who may buy and use our products like a gift card. We have a cashier who may be using it at the store and fulfilling your order request. We have a manager at the outlet who has to deal with some support issues or who has to deal with some bulk purchases and such things. We have an administrator who needs to set up things and needs to be able to control the various parameters. We have developers who integrate with our APIs. We have our own operations and support teams, which have their own challenges in the way things have to be set up, or help desk requests have to be managed and so on. And so our solution has to actually consider all these angles, right? It does not help us if my internal customers are not happy and my external customers are happy, because it'll slow down the business. We do have to consider all these elements. Of course, we have to keep a balance, and the prioritization is important in that regard. But certainly, all these aspects are important. And every time you think about this, I do remember Dave Hitz in our days at NetApp when he used to say, understand what the product means to our customers and what will happen if my product fails for that customer. And so what will happen to the end customer? What will happen to the cashier? What will happen to my support team? What will happen to my IT team? So all those things have to be part of that consideration in terms of building a really good, scalable enterprise class SaaS product. And just the range, right, has actually pushed me into a different zone of learning, a different zone of growth that I personally have enjoyed a lot.
That's really fascinating to listen to, Sanjay. In fact, I hope we can have several conversations around all of these considerations. In my mind, I think each of them merits an episode by itself, especially the transition from on-prem to delivering software as a service, and companies having to sort of become more product-led, where the power of buying and choosing a solution lies more and more with all of those personas that you just described. I think it's going to be fascinating and very challenging days ahead for product companies. Certainly, the way you described it looks like you're already, in some sense, heading in that direction and maybe even leading the way.
Yeah, and the other big shift for me, Chitra, was the agility that was required. You recollect our days in NetApp when our releases would easily take more than a year.
Yes.
Right. Even before that, when I was at Nortel, the telecom systems that we talked about were fairly large. Okay, I mean, 4 months to 6 months was quite a given for a release. Okay, and adoption of that release was also not immediate. Right. I mean, you made a release, and maybe over the next 6 months or a year, that release was adopted by the existing customers because they had their own processes of certifying the new release and adopting it and whatnot. Over here, given the SaaS model and given the need to actually move fairly quickly, we work certainly in an agile mode, and we tend to have a 6-week sprint a 2-week sprint, but a 6-week release. So within 3 sprints, we typically make a release. And the aim is always to get some incremental capability onto the production system and complete in that regard, right? It may not be that for a given customer, his overall solution is complete or not. He may have to wait for 2 releases, but whatever we push on the production is complete and is adding value to at least a set of customers. So that happens very, very rapidly. And that also required me to learn new tools, new techniques, the agile process with all the continuous integration, continuous delivery pipelines, all of those things, right? A lot of lessons, and structuring the organization for that, being able to create a path that will allow us to shift left very quickly in terms of how early we find issues so that we don't discover them when we push things to production. Those things have been actually very, very interesting in the journey.
Moving from there on, and I know that the foundation that is named after your daughter, is a big thing for you. How has that influenced what you've done? And when we spoke last time, you also mentioned that you were eventually also looking to see how you could pay it forward in some sense for children and in the context of education today. Would you like to share something about that?
That is a very core part of what I am, and thanks to you for giving me this chance to speak about that. So we lost Arundhati in September 2014. Okay, she was a PG student at CMC Vellore. The day she met with the accident, I was away in the US. So that was actually sort of a double whammy for me. And my wife Shibangi had to manage a lot of things on her own. She met with a horrific accident. And so we resolved to put our energy into improving road safety. Every hour, some 15 to 16 people die on our roads. India has a dubious distinction of being number one in this record. So we blame authorities, and I won't say that we are wrong. They are justified complaints. The potloads on our roads, the humps are non-standard, the signage is poor or missing, lighting is poor or missing. Maybe there's no mechanism to calm the traffic stream in certain situations. I do feel that the civic agencies should be held accountable, that's for sure. But are these the only reasons? Once we go into some of the details, we do realize that a lot of accidents are because of human errors. And human errors compound the problem that the road conditions present. So imagine if somebody is overspeeding and there are potholes. Imagine if somebody is overspeeding or driving rash and the lighting is poor. So these are the things that we think are avoidable and that we can actually do something to avoid that. We also think that parents are role models for their children, right? So it is incumbent on us to model good road behavior. As an example, if you use the mobile phone when driving, if you do not wear seat belts, if you do not use helmets, then don't be surprised if your children are likely to do the same. So while we do sessions with the adults also, what we felt was the need to actually pass on these messages in a consistent and a sustained manner to the school children, because they are the future. They are the ones who can actually take it forward. It's very hard to actually influence an adult and say, do it differently, because adults feel that they know everything. And in most cases, when we talk about something like using the mobile phone while driving, most people have the concept that, I'm in control. You don't need to tell me. Right? So we work with the school children because they are the future. And we have some nice, unique programs, like we have Safety Quest, a quizzing platform. We have a hazard mapping module that convey these messages of safety in a very, very engaging manner. Right? And we have sort of divided it into age-appropriate material. So for the children for the primary school, it's slightly different. For the adult children, it is slightly different. And we also work with like-minded people and organizations to influence policy. The whole aim over here has been really to work with school children because they are the future, and that we think they can actually carry this message. They can maybe influence their parents, but more importantly, if they actually retain even a fraction of it, it will probably help us for the future. And so my key message to all listeners, and in this particular case, I'm sure the listeners will be adults. So my request is that we should all recognize that we do have problems with the roads, but let us make sure that our road behavior does not lead to anybody else suffering from that. Take responsibility for what we're doing. And if you take even one thing away from this, just remember, hands-free is not risk-free.
Thank you, Sanjay. That's certainly a very, very powerful message. And thank you so much for sharing it here. I'm sure this is a really strong message for our listeners. We've been having a very interesting and long conversation, but I can't leave this conversation without asking you a message for aspirants as well, looking to get into the field of either software or technology. What is it that you would like to leave them with?
So I have two parts, I think, to this. Okay, the first is, I'm a sports buff, and there are various elements of. I may not be as quick with all statistics nowadays as I used to be in the past, but I love sport and I love the process that coaches and the sportsmen go through. Right, and as most sports coaches will tell you, focus on the process to improve, because your first competition should be yourself, and for that you need to recognize that you're putting in your best, and then you're trying to better your best. That is the first thing that you should be basically looking for. In that process, there are various elements that come in, right, as to how you practice, who are the people you practice with. Because if you practice with people who are less good, in the sport, let's say, you will feel you're great. And sometimes it helps to get your confidence, okay? But if you want to really push your game, you have to actually compete with the best. There's also the element of perseverance that comes over there, because you don't get these results overnight, right? And you have to actually stick with that. There's also a lesson about learning from others and how you pick from others. What are the things that you can pick from others? Not everybody is skilled at every single thing, right? But you will pick up various things. Maybe it is about how well somebody is actually convincing or negotiating, or maybe it is about a very elegant design, or maybe it is about really a very simple design, right? And that actually makes a big difference, because simplicity will always beat the complexity in terms of realizing features. The other thing I wanted to mention over here, and this is really the question about, are you an entrepreneur or are you actually working in a sort of a job environment, right? And to me, that is an analogy of a love marriage versus an arranged marriage. The entrepreneurs follow their passion. If you're an entrepreneur, you will chart your own course for sure. And that passion will definitely be coupled with the willingness to put in the long hours. And very often, this love marriage will lead to the baby, which is the organization that you will build and the solution that you will build and how you will take it forward, right? For the others, it is loving what you do, right? But it is an arranged marriage where the love develops over time. And it requires a fundamental attribute or an attitude of being open and constantly pushing yourself to share and learn, whether it is technology, whether it is business, whether it is operations. And it's also about giving, right? Which leads to better teamwork, better organization outcome, because you're thinking beyond your own narrow task. So the more you give, the more you will grow. So this is a couple of things that I thought could be shared.
A beautiful message, Sanjay. I don't think anybody has ever provided this kind of analogy. So thank you so much for your time. And I will certainly look forward to more conversations with you.
Thank you, Chitra. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And thanks for being a COVID warrior and helping everybody in these difficult times.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Anita for promoting the Software People stories.
If you like this episode,
Please subscribe on your favorite podcast client.
And spread the word in your network.
if you'd like to share your story,
Contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.